Hello, everyone. Welcome back one last time to the 10th and final episode of This Is Who We Are. My name is Steve Greenfield, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to prepare and present this programming for you over the last couple of months. Back near the end of 2020, when I first conceived of doing an online video program, the idea I had was to see if, based on my own personal experience, as I've mentioned often enough, both as an elected official in a nonpartisan legislative body, the school board, and as an emergency responder in the fire department, that I have seen that we do not actually have the kind of divisions between each other that the mainstream media and our mainstream political parties insist that we have and that we must have. And so the idea that I was conceiving at the time was to simply present what I see as mechanisms by which we can look beyond these artificially installed bubbles and barriers and things that are delivered to us by people in whose interest, whose in power and profit interest those barriers are in the interest of, and start to work together, if not on everything all at once at any one time, because that's not possible in a society as pluralistic as we are, but instead to focus on specific missions. The idea was to look at it as you looked at maybe, your school extracurricular activities when you were a kid. I'll name, in my case, right? I was on the track team. I was in the senior band. I was in the after-school musicals. I think the overlap between those three activities was probably 2 or 3 people tops. And all 3 of those groups succeeded in their missions. The musical was successfully presented. The band put on its concert. The track team ran its contests with other schools. If any of us had insisted that everyone has to be on the track team and in the musicals and in the band in order for any of us to work together on all 3 of those things, then none of them would have succeeded. And, we never would have gotten any of this stuff done. But it never occurred to us that there would be any reason for those divisions to exist. And so when we went to the musical after school and noticed that only 2 people from the track team were there, this didn't bother us. We didn't say, oh, they hate musicals, I can't run on the track team with them anymore. Or, oh, those musical people, they just sing. They don't play musical instruments. They're not in the band. I'm not going to play piano for them when they want to sing. None of us conceived of things that way. It was totally natural for us to work with people when we worked with them, and to work with other people when we were working with those other people, and not with a lot of the same people. Somewhere along the line, messaging that we got through popular culture, through political and economic power, has led us to believe that we have to have, by and large, an all or nothing approach to how we advocate for things we care about in our society, how we advocate before government and courts and other institutions of power for what we want in our society. And, over the last 20 years with the internet and separate media outlets and social media, we've even come to the point where we now think that those are bases by which we either can be friends or not be friends with people in other areas outside of the political advocacy arenas, democracy arenas. And this has just had the most tragic effect on the United States since the 1850s, when back at that time our democratic processes, such as they were, flawed as they were, broke down, and we spent the next 6 years in the Midwest, in bleeding Kansas and Missouri, John Brown's rebellion and other mechanisms, the destruction of the Whig Party, its replacement by the Republicans, until we finally broke out in full-out national shooting war, the Civil War, and killed so many Americans that if this were done again in our time, that number would be in the 8 to 10 million range. And I just can't take this anymore, and I thought that it would be a worthwhile thing, as quixotic as it may be, a worthwhile thing on my part to set down my thoughts about things that we maybe all can remember that we always knew, and see if it could get out to a few people, get out there in discussion. What the heck, maybe just, help me sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that I gave the best effort I could to reminding people of, that maybe, if this is who we are, and if this is, who we've always been, then maybe we don't have to stay that way, and not to go all 12-step on everyone, although maybe to go just, a little bit 12-step on everyone. if we don't recognize that this is who we are, if we keep listening to these same leaders whom we trust but don't deserve our trust, when they tell us this, they tell us that this isn't who we are, it's that first step, right? We have to recognize that this is who we are, and it's not recent. We have to recognize that we were founded this way, that the Constitution insisted that these things would have to periodically happen, because in order to prevent slavery from being voted out of existence, we built certain abrogations of democracy and interferences with democracy into our Constitution, which all but guarantees that in other areas other than slavery, that this absence of democracy will periodically drive people to such despair that they will break out in violence in an attempt to get what they want. And it will be organized violence. It will be violence sponsored by establishment, by people who are successful in business, by people who are powerful in government, in order to get people to apply the kind of pressure that's not available in the ballot booth because of the way our Constitution is designed to get what they want. There have been many unsuccessful attempts at this. There have been many, successful efforts at this. Two that stand out being the overthrow of the Wilmington, North Carolina election in the late 1800s, I believe, 1898, and the more recent 2000 Brooks Brothers riot in Miami-Dade that arrested the Florida count in the 2000 election, thereby stretching out the count to the point where it went before a partisan Supreme Court and ended up changing the course of history again. Also, the 1876 election, which was a presidential election, which was similarly hung in the Electoral College, and the southern states were able to exact the Republicans to agree to end Reconstruction and turn the reins of government back over to the former slave owners in order to allow Rutherford B. Hayes to become president. It could be argued that that Bleeding Kansas and John Brown's rebellion were ultimately successful because they persisted long enough for the full-scale Civil War to begin, and it was the Civil War and not any democratic process that finally brought slavery to an end. So it's not just unsuccessful things like we saw on January 6th that are the examples of this breaking out. In fact, by and large, these organized acts of violence have been successful. And so we need to recognize that. If we don't recognize that, if we keep thinking that we don't want to be like this, but we're not acknowledging that we are like this and that we've always been like this, then what hope do we have of acting on our desire to no longer be like this? It's too facile and too false for liberals to say, well, it's like this because of the conservatives. They're the ones that were, it's too facile for conservatives to say the same thing about liberals. About how cancel culture and they're squelching free speech. And as I've said many, many times over the course of this program, the problem here is that there is just enough truth in all of those accusations, right? There's just enough visible truth in all of those accusations for it to easily be turned into a broad brush against all of conservatives, against all of liberals, and for all of us to retreat into our trenches behind our barricades, and into our bubbles, and insist that the entirety of the people with whom we disagree on any particular issue or even any particular set of issues are completely, socially, politically, economically, in every possible way, antithetical to us in every way, and a hostile force within our own borders that is more dangerous to us than any possible hostile force coming from any other source. And as a result of that, we become the self-fulfilling prophecy about that. We become the very hostile forces. We keep on reinforcing that. We keep on reminding ourselves that the goal is to prevent the other side from being elected, to prevent the other side from organizing, to work. And each side is driven by the exact same motive, to the point where so much time has gone by. Talk about, like soldiers that have been out on a war front for so long and out of communication with their own root values and the cause of the conflict, that they're just fighting for the sake of fighting and no longer have any sense of what the cause was that brought them out, what the mission is. The mission is to live another day, to destroy the other side for another day, and to live another day. And the manifestation of that in our society today is that almost nobody, in the single digits, that are voting on the basis of the issues. Those single digits can be counted in minor party and write-in voting, and this very tiny margin of 1 or 2% of people that the media dubs the swing voters that can go back and forth across the center line of the two major parties. And those are the only people that are voting on how they're perceiving the issues as being presented and what kind of solutions might exist for the problems of our society. And everybody else is just voting to stop the other side from winning, and on the grounds of the same grounds. They articulate it the exact same way, both sides, that America as we know it will come to an end if the other side wins this election. That is the language that both sides are using, despite the fact that year after year, at least since the end of the Civil War, America as we know it, the only way it's ever come to an end, and America as we know it has come to an end many, many times. When we started with, steam engines in the 1830s and the 1840s, and then built the railroads and giant manufacturing facilities and giant mining machinery. America as we knew it came to an end. When the telegraph was installed and later the telephone, America as we knew it came to an end. When electricity was invented, America as we knew it came to an end in at least the populated parts of the country. And then in the 1930s, through Franklin Roosevelt's fully socialist Tennessee Valley Authority, then came to an end in rural America as well. The milkman stopped coming to our house. We decided that in World War I, we decided in 1917 that we wanted to enter the sphere of European imperial warfare. And then we maintained that, through the Great Depression, through World War II, and then the Cold War. We transformed into a global empire from an isolated country relying on its own substantial natural resources within easily defensible water and land borders. We exited isolationism, and not only exited, but became the dominant world power, which we've remained to this day. This was all done in a bipartisan fashion, all of it. We have the internet. Right? Look at us now, this forum that we're on right now, this platform we're using right now, network television. All of this transformed America and made it unrecognizable. Air travel, when that came in to what it was before. But essentially the fundamentals, who we are, what we want, our material needs, our healthcare needs, how we enjoy each other's company, our friends, our family, the activities we pursue. We've been playing baseball and football and basketball in this country for an awfully long time. And no matter which party wins an election, we just keep on doing that, there's so much of us, we're changing technologically. We're evolving into a constantly modernizing society. Anybody who was alive in 1920, who walked into America today, would see something that they don't recognize. Anybody from 1870 who walked into 1920 America and saw cars and roads and telephones and wires and electric lights on at 1 o'clock in the morning would have seen an America they did not recognize. But that was fine. What are we going to do? Live out in the woods, for forever? The world is changing, technology is developing, and so this dread fear that we're going to be in America that we no longer recognize is completely unfounded. And we have all, little by little, in an evolutionary process, as the technology of the world keeps on growing, we have accepted an America that is unrecognizable generation from generation. You never have to go back more than 3 generations to see an America that is unrecognizable to you at any given moment, and you wouldn't have to go back any further than 3 generations to put people into a time machine and bring them into today's America, whenever that moment would be, when that time machine was operated, and they would be in an America that they did not recognize, and in a world, an outside world beyond America, for the very same reasons that they did not recognize, and every culture in their own indigenous location, in their own form of a culture that they could not recognize from when their great-grandfathers were on that same soil and living in that same culture under those same names. So we need to dispense with that, right? That's manufactured, that's artificial. That's completely, a nonsensical argument for people to be making, and the one, of course, that works the best to make sure that we do remain at odds with each other, and most importantly, that we stay out of the way of the powerful people whose GDP and whose wealth and whose income and whose real estate and whose stock holdings just continue to grow, whose ability to export net worth to other countries so that when our own purchasing power declines, that they don't lose any of their income or global power. By constantly citing this false belief that something about us is going to fundamentally be lost forever, is made up expressly for that purpose, to keep us looking at each other instead of at them as the people whose interests are antithetical to ours. And so it keeps on working that way, like all through history, generation after generation, century after century. It keeps on working that way. You don't have to be Adam Smith, you don't have to be Karl Marx or anyone else to notice that this is exactly what's happening and what has always happened since the beginning of time. So that was the goal of this program. Let's help break that stuff down, because we know in our real lives, like the analogy I just made, analogy of the week about, my own experience in extracurricular activities in high school, in which there was almost no overlap between the interests of the people in the different groups, and yet nobody was angry at each other and nobody was refusing to participate in any of the groups or interfering with the success of the mission of those groups just because it wasn't the same people in all the groups. We all moved around, we mixed and matched, we did whatever interested us with the other people who were interested in those things. And we can do that in politics as well. We could, and we must, because we're on our way down here, folks. 500,000 people dead. We still don't have health insurance, but we do still have 7 wars, and maybe 2 in the on-deck circle. Even though we just changed administrations to a different party, it's all still on path exactly as it was before those changes were made. So here, just past the quarter mark, once again, I will pause for a program identification. This is the 10th and final episode of This Is Who We Are. My name is Steve Greenfield, and I'm glad to have you with me this one last time. And I truly hope that you will give some thought to what you're hearing, pass it along to your friends, get into some discussions, mostly pass it along to people that don't necessarily share your politics or don't necessarily share your religious beliefs or lack thereof or anything, along those lines. Share it with them. Use it as a basis to start this conversation among yourselves. Like I said, blow up those bubbles, tear down those barriers, come out from behind those barricades. We didn't build those barricades. Those barricades and bubbles were built by the people whose power they serve. And so, we need to all step up and take responsibility for ourselves, remember who we're capable of being, and make this stuff happen. Like, stop taking orders from powerful people. Stop believing something just because a powerful person that you trust told it to you. I've said this in almost every broadcast. That the divisions that exist between us exist because we believe lies that are told to us by people whose interests are served by us believing those lies, and who have not done a single thing to deserve the trust that we place in them. Certainly, we should be able to understand that we can place more trust in the people that are stocking the shelves at our local supermarket. Certainly, in the people that are responding in fire trucks, in ambulances when we call 911. In the people that install the traffic lights that keep our roads running smoothly. Those are the people we know we can trust. Those are the people who demonstrate every single day that we can trust them. Those supermarket shelves, they keep getting stocked every time we buy another bag of groceries. We go back the next time, it's ready for us. Those are the people we can trust. The people that start wars, not so much. We've had a lot of wars in my lifetime. I'm born in 1961. We've had a lot of wars in my lifetime over many, many years. 10 years for that war. Who knows, a little one, Grenada, Panama, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, now for the last 20 straight years, Libya, Syria, one after another, 40 years of threat of invading Iran, which could still erupt at any time, Yemen, been going on with a proxy, Saudi Arabia fighting in our name. Venezuela, Joe Biden just announced he's continuing the emergency, state of emergency. Is there a state of emergency, or like is the Venezuelan Navy, anchored 12 miles off Florida? I mean, what is of California? What is this state of emergency that we're in with Venezuela? Why do we accept this? Why do we trust Joe Biden to announce that state of emergency? Why did we trust Donald Trump to announce that state of emergency? And by the way, he was continuing it from the first one that was announced by Barack Obama. What has this got to do with our lives? This isn't putting any toilet paper on the shelf at our supermarket like was not being provided for so long when the pandemic first started. Let's remember who we can trust. We can trust each other. We can trust the people that we see doing the work in our daily lives, who make the products we buy, deliver this. The guy who comes in to fix the furnace, that's the person you can trust. It doesn't matter that person voted for Donald Trump. That's the person you can trust. You can trust the doctor you go to, to set your leg when you've broken your bone. If that doctor voted for Joe Biden, that doesn't mean he's not someone you can trust. It's Joe Biden that you can't trust. It's Donald Trump that you can't trust. We can all trust each other. These other things that we're imagining are reasons why we can't trust each other. They are not that at all. They are reasons why we don't agree with each other on everything, why we have different values about things than each other. That's the price we pay for being a pluralistic society, right? That's what we want to be, a pluralistic society where everyone can be who they want, live the life they want, right? That's the ideal, right? We never get there, but that's the dream. That's the goal. That's what we were promised. That's what they taught us in school. That's what they trained us to fulfill, in outside activities, in theater, in sports, in Boy Scouts, everything, everything that we did. That was the dream, right? That those opportunities can exist to be whatever we want, to believe whatever we want, that we don't get in each other's way about that kind of thing. And so what ends up happening is that we fall for transferring those differences of beliefs and interests into the political arena, where we imagine that if so-and-so gets elected, I'm not going to be able to go to church anymore. If so-and-so gets elected, I'm not going to be able to play baseball anymore. If so-and-so gets elected, I'm not going to be able to be a musician anymore. I'm not going to be able, to choose the doctors that I would like to choose. If that person, none of that is true. If we stop and think about that, none of that is true. Okay? When I call on Joe Biden to provide my family with health insurance, he doesn't do it. But when I call on the people that service my furnace, they come right over. It's like taxes, right? All I have to do is pay them. All they want is money for their time and any equipment that they brought with them, anything that they have to install. And I pay them, right? That's, in theory, that's what we're supposed to be doing with our taxes. We're supposed to need things, and we can argue with each other about what we need and how much of it we need and how much we're willing to pay for it. Just like the furnace right behind me over there in the next room in my basement. We want security. We want healthcare. We want roads. We want communications. We want scientific research. We want schools. We want fire departments. We want police. We want courts. Those are the things that we want, and we pay for them. And it should operate exactly the same way as, when I need my floors refinished, or when I need my furnace repaired, or when I need my broken leg set and I go to the doctor. It should all be on that exact same basis. And it all breaks down because we've become convinced somehow that it's not on that basis, that what matters is actually the values of the people who go take those seats rather than what they actually do for us with our money when they take those seats. And honestly, if you look at it, it differs only a little bit. Only a little bit. I'm not discounting that those differences happen, but as I was discussing last week in the week before in the 2 episodes about war, those things constitute nibbling around the edges. And I'm going to tell you why they constitute nibbling around the edges. They constitute nibbling around the edges because the bigger issues themselves, right? The isms, all of the isms that we're concerned with out there, the bigger issues themselves are issues that stem from the way our large institutions operate, right? Our large economies, our corporations, our government institutions, our media institutions, the way that they operate on a for-profit basis, the basic way that all of it operates. And this is not here to advocate for or against capitalism. We're not having that argument here, right? Because that's part of the beliefs that we're all allowed to differ about. But at least we all, whether we believe in capitalism or not, we all agree on this one fundamental thing, which is the way that it operates is that anything that can be done and sold for more money than it costs to do it will happen. Right? The oil comes out of the ground because it turns into money when we do that, and putting it back in the ground, even if that means helping the environment, doesn't pull any money out of the ground. So that's a hard thing to accomplish, but getting the oil out of the ground and burning it, that's an easy thing to accomplish because that can be turned into a lot more money than it costs to do it. We used to have child labor, because you could just pay people to work and they would work, and families were poor and they sent their children out to work instead of going to school. And it took an enormous amount of political activity over many, many generations to get that to stop. And as much as that was about the morality of child labor and how exploitive that was, ultimately all of capitalism grew because by having children stay in school long enough to become effective employees, then the private sector was able to grow as well. And have, it worked out for everybody. The things that actually work out, the things that come to pass is when the moral imperative and the economic imperative meet. That's one thing that capitalism does have going for it when it's integrated with democracy. That has actually always happened, but since roughly 1996 has just stopped. Maybe 1993, contract with America, was brought to a complete stop in this country. After 220 years of working slowly, agonizingly, but little by little, constantly working, was brought to a stop. I will put a date certain on when it came to a stop. It was the contract with America. In 1993. I'm not going to pin this on Reagan. Reagan was working with a majority Democrat legislature, both houses of Congress. There was still, okay, we don't want to go along with everything you say, but we're still going to try to make things happen. Some things we're going to make happen. The things that we can agree on. This whole concept that my program here is about, the things that we can agree on. Let's at least get those things done. And that's not the same thing as saying, let's get half done. Let's give half the money to the things that we don't agree on, thereby not really financing it enough to succeed and restarting that whole self-fulfilling cycle of how things aren't getting done. And we're wasting money and it's not getting done. The idea of meeting at the middle is kind of like throwing a 50-foot rope to people who are drowning 100 feet offshore. You spent a lot of money for the rope, and you didn't rescue the person. So the people who say you shouldn't have spent the money because you didn't rescue the person, they're right. And the people who said we should have spent twice as much money because that was the only way to get enough rope to rescue the person, they're also right. And so why did anybody decide to meet in the middle? The people who agreed to meet in the middle and buy only a 50-foot rope are equally responsible for why that person drowned as the people who didn't want to spend the money at all. And in a strange irony, if the people who didn't want to spend the money at all had gotten their way, that person still would have drowned every bit as much as he did when the 50-foot rope was purchased. But at least the money that was spent on the rope would still be available to do something else that perhaps we do agree on. And so there's another big problem of how we've come to look at things. We now think that compromise is meeting in the middle, and that's not effective compromise. Effective compromise is more, sometimes you get all of what you want, and sometimes I get all of what I want, because the meeting in the middle means nobody ever gets anything, that nothing ever happens, that money just keeps getting flushed down the toilet, without it ever once having been aggregated into enough of an investment to actually make the thing that was being sought work. So then we all get angry. We don't want taxes. They're wasting our taxes. And it's true. They're wasting our taxes. You tax rebels who believe that, I'm completely with you. They are wasting our taxes together. on a bipartisan basis because they're compromising. Both sides are compromising on that 50-foot rope time and time again. It's not one side or the other. Look that squarely in the eye. They are compromising on buying a 50-foot rope for people that are drowning 100 feet off the shore over and over and over again. You are right. They are wasting your taxes. They are invading countries that are not threatening us and wasting literally 70% of your taxes doing that and driving up your oil prices. We destabilize the oil patch in the Middle East. And then our oil prices, the commodity price rises and our oil prices go up. And the people that are pumping oil locally in Texas and Oklahoma and California just get richer and richer and richer, even though there's no threat to the domestic oil because it's a global commodity. They don't care about you. They don't set, American oil companies don't set an American oil price for domestic oil production. They sell you at the global commodity price because if you won't buy it at their price, they can put it on a boat and ship it out to some country that will. Thank you, global economy. So some of you anti-globalization people, whether you're from the right or the left, you have a point too. That's as real as the wasting of the tax money and the constant purchasing of a 50-foot rope for people 100 feet offshore. You're all right. Everyone's right. Liberals, those conservatives are right. Conservatives, those liberals are right. And why are we not agreeing that we're all right? We're not agreeing that we're all right because people in power are lying to us that we are each other's enemies. And they're laughing all the way to the bank as they watch us fall for it time and time again. So just past the half-hour mark, I will pause once again for a program ID. This is the 10th and final episode of This Is Who We Are. My name is Steve Greenfield. I welcome you back this one last time. I hope you share this information. I hope you share it mostly with people that you think don't share your values, that you think don't agree with you on major political issues. And discuss it among yourselves and see if we can move to something better. And I'll tell you something else. I refer very frequently to things I've done in my own life, school board, after school activities, fire department, all these places in my own life where I've seen this system of working together on a mission by mission basis. Work, absolutely and without fail every single time. And I've seen every single instance in which we create a lot of rules about who we can work with, and all of those things fail. And even when they succeed, they only succeed briefly because it's presented in the form of conquest of the other side, which motivates the other side to take that hill back. Pointlessly expend all their resources to take that hill back. And then your side expends all their resources to take that hill back. Losing all train of thought about why we were doing that in the first place, why we wanted the hill in the first place, that the mission then becomes just driving the other side off the hill. We have no idea what we want to do with that hill in the brief time that we have it, and then we just as quickly lose it and have to devote all our resources to reconquering it. This is nonsense. We have to stop it. And what are the agencies in our system that do succeed, that do get what they want? Look at, just as an example, Southern Baptists and Catholics. It is the theological position of the Southern Baptist Convention that Catholicism is apostasy, that it is false Christianity. They believe that Catholics are going to go to hell for following blind guides and practicing a false form of Christianity. This has never stopped them from working with the Catholic Church on ending abortion. Never once. Okay, and then on another issue, let's say the death penalty, where the Baptists very firmly support it and the Catholic Church opposes it. Well, on that, obviously, they don't work together. But the fact that they're not working together on the death penalty does not dissuade them in any way from working together to stop abortion or to stop birth control from being provided in schools or any of the on this one area where they do agree. Right? They're going to agree. And if anybody were to propose that religious tax exemptions be ended, all the religions, no matter what they believe, the ones that have gay ministers are going to work together with the ones that hate gays, to stop Congress from doing that. And then they'll go back to disagreeing with each other and not working together on other things. Here's another big one that blows my mind all the time. a very, very, very tiny number of right-wing Jewish Zionists. Out of the 7 million American Jews, there's probably only a few 100,000 that fit that category. And yes, some of them are fabulously wealthy, but they do not outnumber the fabulously wealthy Jews that believe that the West Bank should be an independent Palestinian nation. So don't worry about the money element. What ends up happening is that you've got a couple of 100,000 right-wing Zionist Jews that believe that all Palestinians should be forced out of the captured territories that remain from the 1967 war. And so what those people have done is they have allied themselves with the massive, Southern Baptist-centered and general evangelical right-wing Christian Zionist movement. Which has 50 million, 100 million people belonging to it, and far more money, and obviously controls far more votes. And based on the numbers, roughly 60% of all Republican Party primary voters able to control on that single issue the outcome of Republican Party primaries and who's going to be in the ballot booth for when Republicans actually win elections and go legislate. This is on the surface of it a mind-boggling agreement between two what should be totally hostile forces. The Christian Zionist movement believes that they need to keep Israel going, run by Jews, and with the West Bank as part of Israel for just long enough for that practice to cause 10 neighboring nations to become so angry that they invade Israel and destroy it. And then Israel then becomes a Christian utopia, and Jerusalem is ruled by Christians, and all the Jews are dead or converted to Christianity. The ultimate Holocaust, if you will. And so why right-wing Zionists would be interested in working with people who they know, should that goal be accomplished, are going to continue working to make that war happen. And to continue proselytizing to Jews, to convert them to Christianity, and to ultimately make that war happen, with which they will not be satisfied until it has its ultimate prophetic destructive force. This seems like an incomprehensible matter, and yet the right-wing Jewish Zionists say to themselves, we're not ready to deal with that problem yet. When we become enemies to each other, we're not at that stage yet. The first thing we need is the thing that we want to accomplish. If that ends up leading to the believed in hostility that we'll then have towards each other, we'll deal with that when that comes. We'll figure out a political program or a military program to deal with that when that day arrives. But if we don't get this thing done, that day's not even going to arrive. And we both want to get this thing done, so let's work together to get this thing done. This is a mind-boggling thing, and yet we see it happening, right? It happens all the time. And let me give you a perfect example of it. We were all, I don't want to say we, because, I don't identify as a liberal. I don't really identify as anything. And so I don't want to fall into that I don't want to lapse into that. See how pernicious that is? It gets in your head. You're always thinking us versus them. It's not a me. I'm one of those outside voters. I never vote for major parties. I've done it like 3 times in my life, and I'm going to be 60 this September. So, here is a perfect example of that. The press led us to believe that when Donald Trump decided that the United States Embassy in Israel was going to move from Tel Aviv, where it's been since 1948, to Jerusalem, which puts it into some very international politics contests and hot water regarding the still unsettled nature of the borders of the majority of the older sections of Jerusalem, and whether that could eventually be the capital city as it was in history, and be the capital city once again for an independent Palestinian state. This created a very big problem, and we were all told by the press that it was someone by the name, recently deceased, Sheldon Adelson, a casino billionaire from Las Vegas, who is at the forefront of financing right-wing Zionist activity, both in the United States. He bankrolls he's dead, evangelical Christianity. He bankrolled far-right settlement politics in Kahanist even politics in Israel. Foreign meddling, if you will, in Israeli politics. And we were told that it was Sheldon Adelson that gave Donald Trump so much money and financed so many institutions that brought Donald Trump into power, that was the force behind Donald Trump making that decision. And that is false. the first person who started publicly calling for Donald Trump to make this move and had been advocating for this move to be made for years, before he finally found a president crazy enough to do it, was Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, the former Senate Majority Leader, then the Senate Minority Leader, the guy that liberals love because he's for gun control and because he's for reproductive. It was Chuck Schumer. This was covered in the Israeli press. That's where I read it. It wasn't covered in our press. Chuck Schumer turned on the heat the second the inaugural address was over. Moved the embassy. He congratulated Donald Trump for having done it. It was Chuck Schumer and every liberal, including every liberal Jew who believes in Palestinian independence, believes it was Sheldon Adelson and Donald Trump, when in fact it was Chuck Schumer. And yes, Sheldon Adelson did support this. And yes, the Baptist types, the Christian Zionists, they did support this. From a political standpoint, the reason it happened was because of Chuck Schumer. He was the person in power. He was the person running his caucus and preventing his caucus from interfering with this in any way. People were able to make their own individual statements in the Senate that they didn't think it was a good idea, but they presented no opposition to it whatsoever. And now Joe Biden is president, and Chuck Schumer is once again the Senate Majority Leader, and Nancy Pelosi is once again Speaker of the House. And guess what? The embassy's not moving back to Tel Aviv. It's staying exactly where it is, even though, Pelosi and Biden supposedly expressed their strong disapproval of it being moved. And it can still go back. The building is still there. It could be moved back. The new building could be repurposed for something else, but it's not going to happen. They got what liberals believe to be the crazy person, the person who doesn't care if Armageddon breaks out, to go ahead and do it. But it was a team effort. Like all these things, it was a team effort. It's not in our interest. It's not in the interest of any American for this to have happened. In my opinion, in many reasonable people's opinion, in about 40% or more, maybe even a majority of the opinion of ordinary people in Israel, it is not in their interest because they know it's going to lead to violence and that violence could eventually come to them in the form of organized armed activity from neighboring nation states and not simply from trying to maintain response to low-level and small-scale terrorism. But they know that this is an inherently insecure action to be taken. So it's not even in their interest. It's in the interest of the people of great power, and certainly in the interest of the people who manufacture all the arms that are going to need to be manufactured to secure this as it continues on down this path, right? And Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are not using the votes that we gave them to do even this one basic, simple to do, fundamental thing. And why? Because they're all in on it together. They truly are. They're in on it together. They stay out of the way of certain decisions to avoid taking the heat for it. But you'll notice that once a decision is made, the next administration that comes in never reverses it. Barack Obama got elected. He beat Hillary Clinton in that primary in 2008 by being able to say, at least superficially, since he wasn't in Congress at the time, that he had opposed the invasion of Iraq. But when he became president, he didn't end the war in Iraq. No, quite the contrary. He surged. He increased troop levels for over a year. It took 2 years for him to start lowering troop levels again after trying to ultimately conquer Iraq when he said he'd get us out. And then his whole 8 years went by and he never got us out. And then Trump came in and said he wanted to end the endless wars and he never got us out. And now Joe Biden is in and he's never going to get us out. It's not going to happen. They play off who's the bad guy on each other, one election back and forth after another. George Bush instituted the new national security strategy based on the Project for a New American Century's recommendations that everyone considered, Nazi-like global conquest warfare. But when Barack Obama became president, he didn't change that national security strategy. It remained in place, and all the wars that Bush started remained in place. And then Obama started a couple more of his own in other oil countries, in Yemen and in Libya, which will also never end. and created massive humanitarian crises. And he created the first declaration of a state of emergency existing between us and Venezuela in his final year in office, which Donald Trump then maintained. And Joe Biden just announced he's also maintaining. I'm becoming redundant here. This stuff drives me nuts. I have to get this across to people. Okay? Nobody ever reverses a decision. We go out there and break our butts trying to reverse an election, and then we succeed and we celebrate, and the people we elected don't reverse any of the things that we elected them to reverse. They keep them going on and on and on, and we don't care. We only care that the next time the issue comes up again, that we stop the other side from winning. That's the catch-all issue. We've lost sight of everything. We've lost sight of everything. We've lost sight of who we can trust. Our own ordinary people around us in our own lives. They are not our enemies. I know that they are not our enemies. There is nobody who's been led by liberal media to believe that there is a fundamental problem with blue-collar, rural, white males, Christian males. There is nobody who's been led to believe that's a fundamentally problematic demographic who believes that when those people are getting off the fire truck when they called 911 because they smelled smoke in their house. Got that? And that is when all of those people you think are fundamentally problematic to how America operates are your favorite people in the world. When your car is upside down on the New York State Thruway and you are bleeding, those are your favorite people in the world. Those are your superheroes. You're going to their next parade. And then as soon as you come home from the parade, you're going to get on Facebook and share somebody's meme about how they are fundamentally terrible people and there's nothing wrong with the United States that can't be fixed by reducing the political power of rural, blue-collar, white Christian males. There you have it, right? Okay, now can you see the inherent contradiction? Boy, time flies when you're passionate. So we're now past the 3-quarter mark, and I'm going to pause now for the final time before we wrap up in our last 15 minutes for this entire program. You are watching This Is Who We Are. My name is Steve Greenfield. It's been an honor, a pleasure, and I think a duty to create and present these programs to you, and I hope that you share them with other people, again, especially people you think you disagree with. One of the most important things that we need to do to get this to happen, to start the process of this happening, because it took us, from 1993 until now, it took us 30 years, 28 years to get here. And, we're not going to get out of here by 2022, although things are so dire right now that we desperately need to get out of here by 2022. Maybe a fair amount by 2024. But if any of this is going to even get off the ground and get going, we have to change the language that the untrustworthy people at the tops of the two false factions that lead us to believe that we're hostile towards each other have trained us to use. Liberals, stop with the deplorables. Stop it. You're told of something that happened by one person, two people, even 10% of the people, 15% of the people of a particular demographic. It's not 51%. It's not 2/3. All it takes to get you to think deplorable, oh, how terrible that entire group of people are. And it's a different issue every single day. It's a different 2% of them, 10% of them, 15% of them. Same thing, conservatives. Stop with the baby killers. Stop with that. What does it do? What does it do? Let's say you win that court decision and Roe versus Wade is struck down. You know what's going to happen? It's not going to end abortion. It's only going to end abortion in certain states, because the liberal states are going to keep it in place. And the ones with divided legislatures where ending it won't be able to pass are going to keep it in place. And in the places where it's ended, the people that have enough money are just going to cross state lines and go to a state where it's legal and pay cash for it. And people who can't do that because they don't have money, most of them are going to go to illegal abortionists, and women are going to die, And organized crime is going to be financed by people seeking to do this. The people who don't want to have abortions, those people are already not having abortions. And for the people that won't go to an illegal provider and help finance a surge in organized crime in so doing, what's the best you could hope for in that situation? They're going to have a baby that they don't want and that they can't afford. And what's the long-term implications of that? And I know that you fundamentally believe from a moral standpoint that those babies need to be saved, and you'll save some. You will. I mean, at least, many of them will eventually end up in jail or dead from violence or from malnutrition or disease because they don't have health care. But at least the fetuses, yeah, you'll save a few of them. But is that going to get you into a more comfortable home? Is that going to make you able to afford your heating oil? Is that going to provide social mobility to your own children because you can't afford higher education, and we largely have a service sector economy now, and they're not going to become coal miners. Those days are over, just like the milkman. They're not going to become coal miners. So what will you have done? You're going to be like those people who were sent to war, and the best they can hope for is to get back home to their own farm in one piece. If you don't stop, war and monopoly corporate factory farming, you're not even going to keep your family farm. You'll have saved a small percentage of fetuses, and you'll lose your farm. You're not even going to have your own small piece of property and some net worth to leave behind to your own children. That's the price you're going to pay. They're not baby killers. They're not. They're just people who think about these things through a different moral lens and look at more elements of it than just the fetus. Are they looking at what happens next? What happens, and you're not going to agree with each other on whether the fetus should be born or not. But then the question becomes, if you made that the most important thing in your life, what did you sacrifice? Whether or not you accomplish it. If you don't accomplish it, if you do accomplish it, what dominoes fell down, like I just mentioned, when you did accomplish it. You created an illegal abortion market that's going to be killing people. You created a situation where the comfortable can just cross state lines. You've created, you've accomplished so little of what you hoped to accomplish, and it came at such a high price of other things that you need in your life. Liberals, same thing. Those deplorables, they want health care. They want to save taxes on. They'll stop the wars with you. They'll get together with you and stop the wars. Maybe they don't want the money that's being saved, to go into healthcare. Maybe they don't, at least at the moment, want it to go to green energy. Maybe they just want it to go in their pockets. Who cares? Who cares what they want to happen with the money? They want that money no longer spent. They want those wars to no longer happen. And so do you. You can live to argue about what happens next only after you get to what happens next. If you never get to what happens next, what was the point? What was the point of ignoring the things where you have common ground in order to focus on the things where you don't? What was the point? Green energy people, listen to me now. Who has more in common with what you're trying to accomplish than farmers? Than well-heeled people with expensive beachfront property or harbor businesses or beachfront businesses? Who is a bigger stakeholder in what you're trying to accomplish than those people? Well, I got to tell you something. Farmers and people with substantial beach property and waterfront businesses and stuff, they tend to be conservative. But they need water levels to remain where they are in order to keep their wealth. Well, sure. What if their motive is a little bit different than yours? Like with the war. So what? It's a powerful motive. They'll spend that money to make it happen. You don't have the money to make it happen. You can't buy television commercials. You can't buy politicians. They can. And right now they're buying politicians that don't want climate change to be addressed. And they're going to lose their investment. And why? Because they've become convinced of many of the same things you are, that they shouldn't be working with you. So let's trust each other. Let's trust each other and get to the things that we don't agree on after we accomplish the things that we do. It doesn't matter that somebody has a different motive from you if they want the same thing. You know, if I want to climb a mountain because there's a pot of gold at the top of it, and you want to climb a mountain because of the glory of getting to the top, or you want to see the view, you want to be able to look at that beautiful 5-state view that's up there, and you don't care about the pot of gold, and I don't care about the view, I care about the pot of gold. And let's say this mountain is so steep, it has such rocky zones that people need to give each other a boost to get up and pull each other behind different sections, that neither one of us are getting to the top of that mountain unless both of us go together. What difference does it make that we want to go up there for two different reasons? If we don't agree to go together, neither one of us is going to get there. And if we do agree to go together, then we're both going to get there. And then we can figure out what to do about the view and the pot of gold after we get there, but only if we get there. That person who's going for the view, if you're the pot of gold person, that person's your only friend. If you're going there for the gold, that person who's going there for the view, he's your only friend. And nobody else is. So change the language. Stop socialist. Stop capitalist. Stop Christian. Stop all of this stuff. Stop it. Just stop it. You know, call owners owners. Call workers workers. Call renters renters. Call small private homeowners mortgage holders, right? I mean, because that's what we are, right? We're not even really homeowners. We're mortgage holders. If we don't pay off the mortgage, the bank's going to take the house. And even after we pay off the mortgage, if we don't keep up that few $1,000s, if our income goes down, we retire, go on Social Security, we can't pay the property taxes, we still don't have the house. It gets taken away by the town, by the county. So we're renting, our house from the school district, from the county, from the town, even after we've paid off the bank. We never own our house. There are owners and there are mortgage holders, there are renters, there are owners, there are employees, and there are employees, employers and employees. That's who we are. That's the language we need to use. That's how we remember that there are people who need their furnace fixed, and there are furnace fixers. Right? We're able to make language effectively in our day-to-day lives for things that we need to do to keep our lives functioning normally. And we need to create that kind of language for how we advocate for things, for the social contract, for the things that we need to get out of our social contract that we're supposedly purchasing as tax-paying consumers with the money that we're sending in as taxes. So, to wrap things up here, let's get to some fundamental truths. Those things that happened, they definitely happened. Slavery happened. Native American genocide happened. Conquest of Mexico happened. Jim Crow happened. The abuse of Chinese workers to build the railroads happened. Racism is real. Sexism is real. Homophobia is real. World War I happened. World War II happened. The Cold War happened. Nuclear bombs were dropped. All of those things happened. The crushing of family farms, it happened. Religious fundamentalism, it happened. It's all real. It's all still happening now. But here's the thing. White people aren't moving to Europe. Black people aren't moving to Africa. Brown people are not moving to Central America or to Asia. Religious people are not becoming atheists. Atheists are not becoming religious. LGBT people are not becoming straight. Straight people are not becoming gay. We're all going to be who we are. All the things that happened in history cannot be changed. They are in place. They all happened. Let's stipulate that. All of those things actually happened. So the only question remaining ahead of us is, now that that's happened, and now that we're all here together and we're stuck here together and none of us are becoming anything other than who we are, and none of us are moving, what do we want to do? Do we want to keep on the road that we're on, where we refuse to find common ground, where we can't work together, where we hate each other, and where we ultimately immolate each other? Or we decide that we're going to find, however uneasy it may be, that we're going to find ways to cooperate with each other and live together and recognize that the bonds that we have are between each other and not the leaders, not the politicians, not the CEOs of giant corporations, okay? Nancy Pelosi doesn't care about us. Mitch McConnell doesn't care about us. Chuck Schumer doesn't care about us. Donald Trump doesn't care about us. Oprah doesn't care about us. Joe Biden doesn't care about us. Obviously, Jerry Falwell Jr. doesn't care about us or his own flock or the fundamentals of religious Christian practice. They don't care about us. They care about each other. They care about remaining atop these powerful institutions, of owning massive amounts of property, of controlling the political system, and serving their own interests and the interests they share with similar elites elsewhere throughout the world. That's what we have to do. We have to stop listening to them, stop obeying them. We have to stop caring about them. We have to stop caring about what they tell us we're supposed to care about, and we're supposed to start caring about each other. And we're supposed to start working together to make the things that we need happen and live together in common, in our own ways, pluralistically, in what can still become the United States of America. I thank you very much for being part of this broadcast. My name is Steve Greenfield. You have been watching This Is Who We Are. I thank you very much. Let's get out there and let's get started.